Hello! Oh, October, that special month where everyone is on the hunt for pumpkin spice lattes, fun costumes, and a hot goth partner. We respect all hot goth genders in this house. But in addition to all of that, it's also one of the most anticipated months in the artist community for an art challenge event known as Inktober. Or at least it was, until around December 2019. In this video, I'm going to cover what Inktober is, the creator of the challenge, the ensuing controversy, and the subsequent cultural impact of the event when it comes to artist communities on the internet. And I also wanted to cover this because I think it ties very well into the age-old digital art versus traditional debate, and just about why we as artists seem to voluntarily fall into these kind of clan-like categorizations. Because Inktober is/was such a big thing, a whole bunch of different artists took part in it from different subsets and communities, and this can lead to both good things and bad things occurring within that situation. There are a lot of people who have covered the Inktober controversy on its own better than I probably ever could, so I will leave some links below in case you are interested, but this is just something that seems to orbit pretty close to that strand, so I thought it would be good to get two birds with one stone. Also, just want to say before proceeding, please don't send any hate towards artists who are still participating in Inktober or have done so previously. Simply put, not everyone knows the ins and outs as to why others are now trying to distance themselves from it, as not everyone keeps up to date with the latest controversy like us commentary weirdos do. People are within their right to continue to participate because at its most surface level, it is just a fun art challenge, and these people should be treated with respect regardless. Not everyone who makes art is terminally online. You can inform them, sure, but just don't be assholes about it. There's quite a bit to be said about this topic, and many different people have their own opinions on it, so I did try to ask a few fellow creators what their thoughts were in order to try and gauge the general consensus, though I have to admit, trying to find at least one traditional artist who had their DMs open or was willing to talk to me was not what I was expecting the hardest part of this video to be. You guys are like the Houdinis of the art community. I'm just hoping to God it isn't because they thought I was going to rip them or their preferred medium to shreds. Absolutely not. I just wanted the perspectives to be balanced in order to avoid any bias as much as possible, but alas, we will have to make do. Before we get to that though, let's go through the events that transpired a la 2019. Let's begin. So what is Inktober? Inktober is an art challenge where you are given one-word prompts for every single day of October. These words often have a very loose connection to Halloween or the season in general, but otherwise the artist will have complete freedom to draw whatever they like. This challenge was created by Jake Parker, an American artist, storyteller, children's book publisher, and animator. His works include things from animated features like Epic and Hot and Here's a Who to New York Times bestsellers like The Little Snowplow. So it's safe to say that Jake has had quite a broad career in the creative field. Jake created the Inktober challenge in 2009, and since its inception has inspired countless artists to try out the challenge for themselves, many of whom now look forward to it as an annual event, and even incorporate the pieces they make into their portfolios, art books, and online shops. This, however, hits a bit of a bumper in 2019, when Jake and his legal team decide to register the Inktober brand as a trademark in preparation for the release of his coming book, Inktober All Year Round, Your Indispensable Guide to Drawing with Ink. When the trademark took effect, hundreds of artists were suddenly faced with cease and desist letters threatening legal action for the use of the term Inktober as their main titles, as well as for using the logo, despite the fact that many of these suddenly infringing properties had been sold for years online previously. To many people, the challenge was seen as an open event that encouraged the community to take part in it without fear of these kinds of things, and that ultimately ended up rubbing a lot of people the wrong way. These artists were understandably outraged, as it was the combined enthusiasm and sheer number of artists participating in the challenge which Jake owed his success to. For many people, it felt very similar to when Disney tried to trademark the Day of the Dead in preparation for the release of Coco. It felt to many like a very selfish decision, considering so many people contributed to the event to the point where it did kind of feel like a holiday, and there was a fear that the largest portion of people who would be subjected to this trademark would be independent, marginalized creators. So Jake was forced to respond and clarify on the specifics of the copyright. On the 20th of December, he addressed in a lengthy statement on his website his reasons and goals for enforcing the trademark, which he reportedly had since 2009. Okay. I'm not going to read out the whole thing, it will be linked below, but the main points he gave were that he wanted to protect his brand from outsiders of the community who only saw it as a means to make profit, and those who would use it to spread hate and violence. He stated that he is fine with artists selling their Inktober artworks, but they must do so under the following conditions. You can't use the Inktober logo, as it is reserved for sponsors. You are allowed to use Inktober plus the year of participation as a subtitle, but not as the leading title on the cover of whatever you're selling. For example, it's okay to use the subtitle based on Inktober 2019 prompts or similar reference, but this is requested to make sure the public can distinguish between independent artists and Jake Parker's own work. And I'm gonna be honest, as bad as the situation is for others, this is perfectly logical from Jake's perspective. Concepts like a knot or pumpkin may not be original, but the actual defining logo itself would still be registered by the organisation, aka Jake, and is therefore subject to copyright. As an example, I got to create some characters for a local medical centre a few years ago, one of which was a friendly cartoon nurse that was used to make children feel more at ease in the waiting room. Even though pretty much anyone can draw their own version of a nurse, if someone were to take that specific one that I drew, which was intended to make people feel less anxious, and draw them in a way that could potentially upset or trigger these patients, and then to add insult to injury, try to sell t-shirts of it, both I and the organisation would of course want there to be some legal safeguards and ramifications to avoid this. But don't get me wrong, it still leaves a very bad taste in my mouth that he apparently had this trademark for 10 years and only chose to enforce it in 2019. Please don't think that I'm on Jake's side just because I can see his logic from a legal perspective. I still think it was a pretty slimy decision to suddenly flip the script now that you're making money from it, and I do genuinely believe that that was the motivator behind setting this in motion. And this, unfortunately, isn't even the worst part of the whole ordeal. In August 2020, Alfonso Dunn, an artist, YouTuber, and author of the book Pen and Ink Drawing, raised attention to the fact that Jake's book, Inktober All Year Round, was concerningly similar to his. And I'm not using that term lightly. Sections of the book feel like they were lifted from Dunn's own entirely, with only slight changes to the order and wording. This, combined with the perceived hypocrisy of Jake deciding to enforce a copyright on anything containing the word Inktober, infuriated people even more. It was bad enough that Inktober became so popular off the backs of thousands of smaller artists for free, but now it's looking like another artist, specifically a renowned and well-accomplished one at that, has had his work stolen. It also wasn't lost on people that Alfonso was a black man, and there is unfortunately a very long and insidious history of people directly lifting ideas from talented POC creators and passing them off as original works. Can I personally say that this is what happened? No, I can't read minds, but I can pay attention to similar situations and notice similar patterns occurring in each of them, and I would encourage others to do the same in order to come to your own conclusions. I don't think it's fair to put this down to coincidence like so many others have, because personally what I've found is that when something feels coincidental, around 8 out of 10 times, it probably isn't. Jake responded to this and expressed contempt that Alfonso didn't contact him directly and instead chose to make this situation public, which people can make their own assumptions and opinions about. I personally don't feel well equipped enough to theorise on this aspect, but by this point the damage had been done. If there's one thing we hate in this community, it's plagiarism, even if it's alleged. And ever since these events, it's no surprise that people have started to break away from Inktober as a whole. Since 2019, other similar art challenges have cropped up that people have chosen to partake in as alternatives, some popular ones being OC-tober, Gore-tober, Black-tober, Kink-tober, and so on. With all of this said, despite everything, Inktober did leave a gigantic impact on the general culture of online art communities in a number of ways, and this also spawned a lot of conversation, behaviours, and perceived rules within these communities since its inception, which I think now is a good time to get into. I can't exactly say that I'm surprised that these events unfolded in the way that they did, especially considering the particular culture that Inktober has created. So let's take a look at that, shall we? So let's start with the actual challenge itself, and you can pretty much see straight away that the key aspect is to draw something every day for an entire month. Pretty self-explanatory, right? Oh, if only things were that simple. Now, this method of creating was popularised and touted around for a while as one of the best pieces of art advice for newcomers especially. And I will give it credit, practice makes perfect, and the more you draw, the more comfortable you are with doing it and the more confident you become. And this is all great, it really is, except for one thing. We live in a society. Not everyone has the time, energy, or even the luxury to draw every day. And if by some miracle someone is capable of doing that, this doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to improve, because if you're rushing to get something out, then you're obviously not going to be looking as closely at things like anatomy, lining, colouring, etc., and you run the risk of stagnating after a certain point. This draw something everyday mentality has done some good for the community, and I do want to stress that Inktober is meant to be a challenge, but a lot of people seem to take it upon themselves to enforce this rule all year round, and that is just extremely impractical in so many ways, and it's also quite damaging, especially if art is your job. You should not be drawing every day because you need that mental separation of work from pleasure. Otherwise, it's going to affect your brain chemistry and you're going to struggle finding joy in anything you do as a hobby, and you're also going to be feeling guilty about not working 24/7. Not having the time to just sit down and let your brain decompress before drawing for yourself is not going to help you in the long run. If you feel that you're capable of drawing every day for a month, then go for it. But please know that it is okay to step away at any time. Stemming from the Draw Everyday Challenge formula, we began to see a large boom of art challenges spring forth in the 2010s, most likely inspired by Inktober. We have things like Mermay, Sketchtember, Junicorn, and Huevember all taking place at various points of the year. I have provided a website link to various listed challenges for every month if you would like to take a look, as it also contains a comprehensive list of Inktober alternatives specifically, but all of these challenges follow a similar rule bar a few outliers. Draw a picture every day for that designated month. And I just wanted to bring this up in relation to my previous point of drawing every day. It's become commonplace for people to take part in a good number of these challenges per year, and I just wanted to reinforce my point about quitting at any point still stands with these two, because what often happens is that I will see people say something along the lines of, well, I didn't manage to finish Inktober like I was supposed to, so I'm gonna try to finish this one to make it up for you guys. And I respect the energy, I really do, but it almost feels like a form of self-punishment for not living up to standards that are often difficult to maintain to begin with, and it also feels scarily similar to the way people approach things like diet culture, for example. Please give yourself a break. Your viewers, fans, or whoever the hell will understand that you're not a machine. And this is where we start to get into things like perfectionism. It's no secret that artists will often torture themselves about not getting correct every single detail in a drawing. This perfectionism, however, can manifest in other ways too, such as constant productivity, immaculate planning and scheduling, and the constant need to keep things moving and to do things perfectly the first time around. Or, at least, make it look like you did it perfect the first time around. And challenges like Inktober are the perfect culmination of this, because I used to see a number of big-name artists who just seemed to whip a perfectly executed Inktober piece out of their asses from seemingly nowhere, when in actual fact they had been planning that Inktober drawing for around 2 months beforehand. This means that they would conceptualize, sketch, ink, record, and have a huge backlog of art to post before the challenge even begins, and this ends up having a bit of a comparison effect similar to influencers, where all of that hard work isn't shown or even acknowledged, and smaller artists who look up to these people will be given a false impression that they are just simply not as good at art and see themselves as failures. I think we all know this by now, but social media lies to you guys. These gorgeous and beautifully executed pieces were being thought through and drawn up before you even realised that the event was around the corner. And I just want to reiterate, just because I'm telling people this doesn't mean that I'm opposed to this kind of rigorous planning. I actually think it's quite admirable if you are able to focus on something so intently like that. But I think it's important for both creators and appreciators to both be honest about the work that they put into what you post, and also to just remember to have a reality check every once in a while. No one is going to accuse you of cheating if you do this, and if they do, they don't know what they're talking about, because nowhere in the original prompt list does it say that you can't draw them in advance. And on the topic of cheating, this in particular has become a huge point of contention for artists across all communities for the absolute longest time. What counts as cheating? Using a reference? Using certain tools or brush settings? Using a computer? And honest to God guys, the way I see it is this. As long as you are not actually stealing someone's work and passing it off as your own, you cannot cheat with art. And the kinds of people who say these things are either horrendously misinformed, or it'll be someone who isn't happy about the fact that someone else knows how to get the same result they can in a fraction of the time with a fraction of the effort. And I know that sounds really harsh, but please know that I'm not talking about normal traditional artists who are just happy to create something. I'm talking about the people, regardless of what medium they use, who get really upset that other people get attention and praise for their work who they feel don't deserve it. And this is where I'm going to try and open the can of worms that is traditional versus digital art. God help me, because I'm scared.
I'm in danger!
Before I even begin to try to tackle this myself, I think now is a good time to come around to those statements I managed to beg some online acquaintances for. Thanks for bailing me out, guys. Not gonna lie, I'm a little bit embarrassed that these were the only ones I could get a hold of in time, but what can you do? Firstly, we'll take a look at what Duchess Celestia had to say on this. So when I asked her about this ongoing debate, she had this to say. I did Inktober 2018 and 2019 to compile into an art book, which put me in a unique position to do every single prompt traditionally and then again digitally, so as to include it in the book with the highest possible quality. And having done it both ways, I can objectively say that at least for me, the experience was a lot more rewarding with traditional art. There's something about just working with pencil and ink and flipping through a sketchbook of Inktober prompts that just made me really happy. That said, this year I'll be doing Cutetober instead, with a very late start, given that I haven't actually done any of it yet, and I'll be doing that completely digitally, so I'm looking forward to seeing how it goes. I certainly don't think there's any right way to participate in any kind of Inktober challenge, and while I've enjoyed doing it traditionally more in the past, that's just my experience, and everyone's will be different. Everyone should be able to enjoy the challenge and the prompts in their own way without gatekeeping from the community, in my opinion. And we also got an entire video section from none other than Mally Malware. Here's what she had to say.
I'm back, suckers! That is to say, hi, I'm Mally Malware, and Fiona has been kind enough to allow me a platform on her channel for a hot second. So, Inktober, eh? Let's all be brutally honest. Fellow artists and depresso kiddos, we all tell ourselves we're gonna do one of the Tober challenges, and then by day 4, we're already out of ideas, time, or memory on the matter. Bonus points if you forget the month is even coming up and you don't realize you've missed your chance until a few days in when a fellow YouTuber asks you if you want to talk about it. Is that too specific? All that is to say that while I am a fan of the concept of Tober challenges, I very rarely actually do them. I just admire those that do. My favorite has always been the Gore-tober challenge specifically, and while I do like the traditional Inktober challenges too, I just tend to like being able to see the creativity of the Gore side things a lot more. Usually they involve flowers and pastels, and I'm just a sucker for that shit. Which is all well and good, but then I hear that there's controversy around these challenges, and Jesus Christ, is there nothing we artists can't find a way to bitch about? First and foremost, I personally do not believe Inktober is, should be, or could be considered a formalized event that a person can claim. I won't get into details on this particular drama, I don't have enough time, but the event puts me in mind of something more along the lines of the SCP Foundation, a free-for-all community-led prompt that anyone and everyone can engage in. If you want to get huffy about people using your particular prompts, I have to wonder what's going on in your thought process when the prompts can be anything from an object like a knife or a feeling like sad. You can't really make claims to those things. I will admit that yes, it can be annoying if someone takes all those prompts and uses them without referencing you or crediting you. I think that's fair enough. But beyond that, they're everyday prompts. You can't really make a claim to them. But like I said, I won't get too deeply into that or I'd steal Fiona's entire video. Next on the controversy list, the argument of traditional versus digital Inktober. My pure, unscented thoughts on this are, fuck off, you killjoys! Okay, let me explain some. What I mean is Inktober, Goretober, any other Tober challenge, and their sister challenges like Mermaid are supposed to be fun. They're supposed to be for self-improvement, community, enjoyment, and just showing what you can do. So jumping up and down and getting on others' asses about not sticking to traditional ink is kind of wild to me. There's so many different variations on the Inktober format because the physical ink is not really the important aspect of the whole event, at least from where I'm standing. In short, come on, guys. It's supposed to be a fun way for people to create together for a month. Just settle down. Now, I will add the caveat that there is some merit in the traditional kiddos getting huffy when they see digital media bulldozing their work during an event that is catering towards them. I do understand why that can be frustrating, but all I can really say about that is, sorry. The internet sucks, and skill and effort don't always ensure that you get seen. Lord knows anime titties always bring in more views than highly detailed, painstaking landscape work. Life is a bitch and art is a curse. Anyways, that is all from me. Thanks again to Fiona for allowing me the time to ramble in her videos. I don't know why she lets the idiots into the party, but I am very happy to be here. Take care of yourselves, my guys.
You know, I like that you said that last part as if I'm not an idiot myself, Mal, but, you know, regardless, thank you both for taking the time out of your day to indulge me one more time. I promise this won't become a habit. I did also run a poll on Twitter asking people what they thought of Inktober's impact on the community, and if they thought that traditional or digital were harder than the other. Out of 14 votes, a good majority thought that neither were harder than the other, and Stroppy tweeted that he finds traditional harder purely from being so used to digital, but that both are valid mediums and neither should be shamed, which is a pretty relatable sentiment. Thank you for your answer, Stroppy. But that said, there is definitely something to be discussed about how people approach Inktober from both sides. Personally, whenever I've done Inktober in the past, I've always done it traditionally because I never really get to do much traditional work anymore, so it's a pretty welcome change of pace personally. And it's like Duchess said, flipping through a sketchbook and seeing all of that hard work laid out in front of you does feel very rewarding, but it can also feel just as rewarding to do it digitally, and sadly, I think one of the issues with Inktober being an online event is that, like Mal said, traditional artists do kind of get bulldozed out of the equation sometimes, and that's kind of a shame because I do think that a lot of creators can benefit from switching it up sometimes. If you are mostly a digital artist, it wouldn't hurt to go traditional sometimes, and vice versa. But why is that? Surely a challenge involving ink would prompt people to do it that way, wouldn't it? Why use a tablet or a drawing program? Well, the biggest reason is because it's easier. That really is the biggest factor, but that simple answer does have a bit more to it. It's easier not because digital art itself is easier, even though it can be in a lot of ways. Believe it or not, you still need to know how to draw even with a computer. No, what makes it easier is accessibility. For me, it is so much easier to open up your drawing program of choice, bang out a piece without having to clean your brushes or risk spilling ink anywhere, export it without having to find that perfect angle and lighting, and then retouch the picture before posting it online. It takes less time, makes less mess, is often cheaper because you aren't buying supplies constantly, and is just generally more efficient if you are one of those artists who has a crazy schedule to keep up with. Does that mean it's better? No, of course it doesn't. Neither are better than the other. Which is why I often find that when people complain about these things being considered cheating, it can come off as a tiny bit elitist, because it kind of reminds me of those teachers who hated anything that wasn't traditionally painted in the style of one of the old masters, so much so that they wouldn't even entertain the idea of seeing things from a different point of view. Shocker, I know. And in that same vein, some digital artists will also look down on those who do traditional because they view it as outdated and old-fashioned. On that point as well, actually, an interesting thing I've heard about that I wish I could find the source for is that crypto bros apparently really don't like traditional art because they can't make a... Actually, making is the wrong word. They can't steal as good of an NFT out of them, which is just... It's hilarious to me, because we all know what quality NFTs look like now, don't we? Moving on. But yeah, I think what gets people heated about not liking the other side is that they can't really translate their skills in the same way that they are usually able to with their preferred medium. And as humans, it's pretty normal for us to get frustrated when we seemingly aren't able to do something straight away. And that tends to be where a lot of the negative connotations come from. It's mostly projection. Not only that, a good chunk of us also absolutely hate change. So when something new and modern and shiny comes around, it's only natural that a lot of people will try to brush it off and trivialize it. But that doesn't mean that it's bad or that it shouldn't exist at all. I do hope that now that other challenges are being pursued in place of Inktober, that this weirdly trivial mindset can at least be subsided a bit, because I do think that the term ink definitely lends a hand to this stupid sensationalism of what is the right way to do the challenge. I don't think it will ever go away, but we could all certainly benefit from just chilling the fuck out a little bit. A random stranger getting a ton of likes doing a piece that probably took a bit less time than what you took on your own isn't the end of the world. And on that note, I can't think of anything else to say, so I think we're done here. Thank you all so much for watching, and if you liked this video, please consider liking or subscribing to keep a lookout for when I next upload. Please make sure to subscribe to the people who helped me out with their statements, and Inktober might almost be over, but pointless artist beef is forever. Stay safe, everyone. Bye!